Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here to talk about transforming assessments in the age of AI. Thank you so much to our engineering colleagues for that wonderful presentation about how they're already integrating AI into core courses. We're going to talk a little bit more broadly today about how you might think about assessments or assignments differently. And we have perspectives from the humanities, the Center for Teaching Excellence, and UFIT today. And so I just want to introduce our panelists. So we have Michael Barber. He's the Assistant Director for the Center of Teaching Excellence with over 25 years of experience in higher education and a doctorate degree in educational psychology. Michael is passionate about learning and teaching. He loves the synergy he feels when a group gathers to discuss how to improve as learners and teachers. He's on a mission to dismantle the paradigms we've made learning and teaching feel artificial and institutional rather than instinctive, social, experiential, and fun. Big mission, Michael. Next up, we have Sid Dobrin. He's the professor and chair of the Department of English. Positioned within writing studies, Dobrin's research focuses on aspects of digital humanities and environmental humanities. Specifically, his work considers the relationship between writing and emerging technologies such as AI, AR, and VR. He also examines the ecological properties of writing as well as eco-criticism and eco-composition, including questions of oceanic criticism. That's why he's in the ocean in this picture. Dobrin is the founding director of the Trace Innovation Initiative, a research hub that studies emerging writing technologies such as AI, AR, and VR, and has been named a digital thought leader by Adobe. He's a member of the Florida Institute for National Security as part of UF's AI initiative. Next up, we have Leota O'Malley. She's an online course quality specialist. As an educator and lifelong resident of Gainesville, Florida, Leota joined the Center for Teaching Excellence at UF after a 30-year odyssey in teaching. She collaborates with the online course review process, consults on teaching best practices, and provides academic integrity support. She earned her BA in English and M.Ed in secondary English education at UF. And last but not least, we have Chris Sharp, who's an educational technologist with the UFIT Center for Instructional Technology and Training. Chris explores emerging technologies and how they can improve teaching and learning across many disciplines. He's a member of the UF Quality Enhancement Plan Task Force, integrating AI across the curriculum. Through the CITT, Chris consults with faculty regarding AI, extended reality applications, innovative online teaching tools, and other educational technologies. And I'm Margeaux Johnson. I'm also with the CITT, with UFIT, part of the Learning Innovation Technologies group, and I'll be helping to facilitate our panel discussion today. The last member of our panel is you as the audience, and so we encourage you to submit the questions you have about AI for assessment. You can submit them through this poll everywhere, and we'll make sure to include your questions towards the end of the presentation. And this link will be on all the slides coming up, so you can add your questions throughout the talk.
And if there are any questions there you really want to see answered, there's a little upvote there as well, so we can see what are the most pressing questions for the audience.
So we're going to start broadly with a question about AI assessment and ethics. And so first off, I want our panelists to consider the ethics surrounding using AI for assessment. Who defines these ethics? Who created these ethics? And how do we create a culture of ethics for students that goes beyond academic integrity? And I'm going to let Leota speak first because she has recent experience with high school education and knows those kinds of students that are coming to UF from high school.
Good morning. First of all, I think it's important to recognize that the questions we're processing and discussing around artificial intelligence and what we're doing in the classroom is across the board. It's happening in K through 12 education just as much as it's happening in higher ed, including this issue of academic integrity And how do we help our students navigate this issue delicately and with transparency? With having said that, I will have to tell you that among my K through 12 colleagues, more secondary than K through 5, one of the biggest questions is how do we know when a student turns in an assignment? How do we know that it's their work? And I'm hearing those same questions when I'm working with professors as an online course specialist reviewing courses as well. The first thing we want to talk about are AI detectors, because many people are turning to them, and that was sort of the gut reaction when ChatGPT came out less than a year ago. I still try to process that ChatGPT is not even a year old yet. They don't work. They're not reliable. They give false positives, they give false negatives. We see a growing body of research right now that is telling us that people who are experimenting with this are putting their own PhD thesis papers in ChatGPT. ChatGPT is claiming ownership. We know that we can run ChatGPT or generative, because we know there's other tools out there besides ChatGPT. We can take the same documents that is generated, run it through, and it'll say it has no idea where that came from. Not only that, but our little darlings have been finding ways to work around this issue of working efficiently and turning in their assignments. So despite this wonderful tool like turnitin.com that we've been using, the students have been working around that for a while because there are other devices where they can cut and paste from sites on the internet and run it through an algorithm that will paraphrase it, and then it slips right through turnitin.com. So just in case you're like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? There was just a study released where linguists set themselves up against ChatGPT to see if they could detect the difference between human-generated writing and artificial intelligence-generated writing. People who study how language is built, they did just as poorly as AI detectors. It's a real struggle. So how do we circumnavigate that? It's got to be about the communication. It's got to be about talking to our students and then guiding them, helping them to understand what integrity means in academia. Many of our high school students, they don't think of it as cheating anymore. They think of it as working efficiently because of their time constraints. And I think that's an important message to get out there.
Thanks, Leota. I saw some strong reactions from Chris at the words plagiarism detection. So let's go to Chris next.
Yeah, I think that issue of plagiarism detection's, a big thing. People are looking for that silver bullet, but, I'm here to say that silver bullet, I would say, was never going to exist. There's not going to be an easy way to say with certainty that would stand up in a, academic court of conduct that, this student did or did not use any sort of external tool like AI tools to do this. I have a bit of a different perspective on this ethics of AI use when it comes to teaching and learning. And I think, from my perspective, that if we're an AI university, it would be almost unethical on our part as educators to let students graduate from UF without getting some experience with AI tools and their capabilities and limitations. I think that at some point within the student's career, there should be in classes where AI use, tools like ChatGPT or many other tools or research tools should be encouraged, so that way they get some exposure to what they're capable of as well as their limitations. I think one analogy that I really like for this concept is that if we let students go through all of university without using AI tools, it'd be like teaching abstinence-only sex education, where if you don't tell them what the tools are and what they're capable of, they will go out into the world not knowing what the problems are with using it. It'll also make them curious, and like if we don't have a firm stance of can we use this on this assignment, can we not use it on this assignment, what ways can we use it, it will leave them in an uncertain place. So I encourage faculty when I'm speaking to them to like have a proactive stance on assignments, like make it clear on instructions what students can do, like can you use this for outlining and brainstorming but not use it for the final product. Can we use this, explain to students that AI and large language models are not a substitute for research tools. They don't work like that. Students come, they think that AI, that ChatGPT is just, oh, I should use that instead of Google because that's an easier replacement. And if we don't let them explore that and explain those fallacies, then they would go out with a poor understanding of what these tools mean for how they could be used and the impacts on their workplace. Other things that I had, like I know that AI's come up with in terms of grading, like should AI be used for grading? And I also just want to put out there that I always think that a human should be in the loop when it comes to AI, when it comes to grading. Just like we wouldn't want students to use AI solely for creating their content, we also wouldn't want to replace the instructor and use AI solely for grading. So I think part of the value of being at a learning institution like this, where there's professors and faculty and teaching assistants, is that they get some of that humanization there, where they get to interact with others. And I know that some other people on the panel have a lot to say about humanization of concepts.
Yeah, I saw Sid nodding along during part of that. I really liked the banning AI as abstinence-only education. So, Sid, would you like to expound on some of your ideas with AI for assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. Is this on? Everybody hear me? Yeah. First of all, thanks, Margot. I love the fact that you throw out this question about ethics and assessment and say, oh, and you have 3 minutes. I've had the opportunity over the last 8-9 months to travel all over the world working on campuses with AI, and it's always this question about integrity that comes up as the first question. And one of the things that I'm very grateful for is that those conversations have started to shift from integrity as a policing mechanism in education, and as a provocation I'll throw out there that if you're approaching Gen Tech or AI in general from a policing standpoint of how do I catch my students using this, that's not education, that's policing, and that's not what we need to be doing. I would also say that one of the things I'm recognizing around the world when I give these talks and have these conversations is that the rest of, not in total, but many campuses are having very different conversations than we're having here at UF. We are in a very good position to be taking these conversations to a next kind of what comes next conversation. And I'm very grateful for having those conversations here with colleagues like this. The other thing I think when the concept of integrity comes up, we tend to trap the concept of integrity in academic integrity. And because we tend to approach AI at UF from a more global, whether it's workplace readiness or theoretical or applied positioning of AI, we have to stop talking about integrity strictly as an academic issue, and we need to be talking about integrity in terms of academic integrity, professional integrity, personal integrity, and civic integrity. And all of those things have to go hand in hand in how we're talking about these things. Now, I'm also glad, as I said, that the integrity conversation is now shifting away from policing in a lot of places to the concepts of assessment. And that to me is an important conversation, because one of the things that I'm seeing is that, particularly since November of last year when ChatGPT dropped and Gen Tech became a center part of how we're talking about AI, is that we're wanting to retrofit these concept of AI tool to the way we have done things in the past. And I think that we're at a moment where we have to start rethinking our educational epistemologies. I'm going to steal your thunder early. So we have to rethink our educational epistemologies and not try to strap AI and Gen Tech to what we have always done, but start re-envisioning what assessment and other parts of what we do as educators can become. And in a lot of ways then for me, that concept of assessment, it gives us the opportunity to now separate assessment from grading and to think about how assessment functions in and of itself as an educational process rather than as a marking tool like grading. And so for me, those are the kinds of conversations about what's going to happen next. And I want to agree with what was said over here by my colleagues, and particularly this concept that first and foremost, transparency and documentation have to lead whatever we do, that it's a matter of identifying when, where, and how. I also would like to push, particularly in terms of assessment, for these same concepts of if we're going to ban it from our students, then we have to ban it for ourselves, that there can't be the hypocrisy of use. We don't get to use and them not. And I think we have to be upfront and transparent about that. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for discussion that I'm not going to be able to get to in 3 minutes' time. But we're poised to have a very interesting conversation about what next-gen assessment's going to look like.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of began to segue into our next question, just like the conversations on UF campus have already, moved beyond this initial, is AI an academic integrity violation? And so I'll let Michael begin with kind of our next question, which is, AI has opened up this new world of possibilities, and what opportunities and challenges, like is assessment just grading, do you see for new assignments and assessments with AI?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, and maybe a lot of the questions that you came with is thinking about, this is giving us new advancements in AI, have given us a moment to kind of pause and reflect and really think about what the purpose of assessment is and why we're assessing students, and think about new ways that we could assess students that maybe we haven't thought about in the past. And when it boils down to it, machine learning has really helped us understand things about human learning and has been informing that for decades. So as an educational psychologist, we use the information processing model to help people understand, help teachers understand how people learn, how they take in information, how they process it, how they store it and retrieve it. And so this is just, in my mind, just a new evolution of new tools and new ways that we can think about assessment and why we actually do it. So if you think about it, our ideas about assessment have been evolving, and we've gone through different paradigms, and I think we're on this hinge of a new paradigm about what assessment is and what it can do and how it can really help facilitate learning. So with essays and grading essays or oral exams, people started wondering about biases leaking in and how can we actually document that students have accomplished outcomes. And so then we moved into this era where we wanted testing to be more objective and standardized, and so we have people filling in bubble sheets or answering multiple choice questions. And we have to really stop and think, what does that communicate to our students about assessment, and is that what we really want to communicate? We're focusing on outcome rather than the process of learning. We're teaching that performance is important, not necessarily what you learned, but can you perform well on an exam? And it also communicates that one size fits all. And so we're going to give everybody the same exam and expect everybody to perform when people may be at different levels. So I think, like I said, we're at that hinge point where we have to start thinking about, stop thinking about ways we can prevent cheating. I thought how odd that we have students record themselves and track micro eye movements, so that we put them in such artificial situations to take tests. And when have you, in a professional setting, had to sit and remember things and fill in a bubble sheet without consulting other people or consulting resources? So what can we do to make assessments more authentic, more real world? What can we do to create individual learning paths for students? I think AI can help us do that sort of thing, assess where they are and find out where the end of their knowledge is and allow them to do some retraining. How can AI help us assess formative learning during the learning process, not just at the end of the learning process? And we've got some great experts, I think, that can help give us some ideas and some answers to those questions. So.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the perspective of our engineering colleagues this morning. I'll be reaching out to Nancy for those lesson frameworks. I think that offering ideas for case studies and understanding data types and those very concrete ideas she offered are great. I know Chris has been working on some interesting projects and ideas for assessment that's authentic.
Yeah, so I really like that the title of this session has the word transforming in it, because as Sid said, it's not just about how do we adapt assessments, how do we bolt AI onto it, but how do we fundamentally transform the types of activities that we do. And keeping in mind that assessments don't always have a grade. Maybe we're assessing as we go and seeing how students are interacting with this and learning some of those concepts. The things that I'm really interested in is what kind of new interactions and activities can we have, because AI can enable that. So AI can be used to help scale up interactions that wouldn't have been possible. So there's times where you have a large class and you wish you could do something. You wish you could do this debate or this role-playing activity, or fit in some more of those case studies or those authentic assessments, maybe a presentation. But we haven't been able to do that because we spend so much time focusing on the assessment strategies that we have that don't allow for space for that. And perhaps AI can make some of these activities more scalable. So I think Margeaux was alluding to there is that there's some classes that I'm working with. We're in experimental stages with this, but there's a legal psychology class, for example, that wanted to teach students some of the psychology in jury selection process. So as a lawyer, how do you evaluate jury members and potential jury members and select people that would be more viable more amenable to your point of view on the case, whether you're the prosecution or the defense. And oftentimes in these classes, that's done through role-playing. But with a large class, that becomes unwieldy. You take up so much time that you wouldn't be able to accomplish that kind of role-playing activity, at least not in a supervised setting. So we're exploring the idea of creating many different chatbot personalities that students interact with, ask questions of, and then they would make an evaluation of if they would accept or reject that person for the jury, and then get a sense of comparing their performance to the rest of the class, who did the other people in the class pick, what outcomes does that have on the outcome of a trial. And now obviously the evidence, of course, matters most when it comes to a trial, but we can't neglect that personalities and perspectives do matter there. Other places that I've looked at this, like with a writing class, where the instructor is working with having students write persuasive or argumentative essays, and ideally he would be able to have students write argument, then he would write a rebuttal to their argument, and the students have to address that, because when you have arguments in real life, they're not just one and done. There's back and forth. So doing that in a large writing class would take an immense amount of time to read all those, write rebuttals, and kind of hold that in your head as students reply again. So looking at role-playing exercises where students are making arguments to large language models, and large language models that have been trained to reply to these arguments and write a counter view or maybe clarifying questions. And then students submit the final paper where they have their initial writing and then the counter view and then their rebuttal to this. And also critiquing, was AI effective here? Because we're bringing in the AI literacy. We're not trying to bamboozle students that these are real people or anything. We're teaching them what the capabilities of these different tools are, while also meeting new assessment strategies and goals that these instructors had.
Yeah, so it sounds like real opportunities for personalizing learning, and I don't think we can ignore that the history of AI in education was adaptive learning and personalized learning before we came to generative AI technologies. And I know that the process Chris is describing really humanizes learning more for the students and allows more feedback. I know that Sid has some concerns about dehumanizing learning with assessment, and would you like to expand on some of those?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, one of the things that's interesting in the conversation we've had so far, we keep thinking and talking about AI as a tool. And I've wanted to start reframing that, particularly in terms of the kinds of assessments that Chris has been talking about, more as a human-machine collaboration, that this is something we work with in a different way rather than that we use. But there is, as Margeaux just alluded to, also that question of what happens when we take the human out of the education process, whether it's the assessment or whether it's the instruction. And to me, part of the reason that most of us got into education was specifically for that human-to-human interaction, that ability to work with our students. So even when we're talking about assessment and the value that AI can provide in rethinking what assessment does, there's also a need for the humanist role in all of this, and there's a need for human interaction, because if we simply decide that AI is going to generate the content of our courses, it's going to generate the assessment tools, it's going to use the assessment tools to assess, what are we as educators losing? And I'm all in favor, obviously, being on a panel like this and the work that I do of encouraging AI development and AI use, but I still think there is a value in having the human there when we're talking with our students. And coming out of writing studies in particular, and for me it's very interesting because ChatGPT basically made writing the proving ground in higher ed for Gen Tech in November. We're not having these conversations in the same way about image generation, about data analysis. There's a whole bunch of other AI that's not going on here. Writing became the proving ground. Well, trying to teach writing without the human involved becomes really problematic. It also, I happen to think, as we're talking about those next levels of conversation and theorization, it also gives us the moment to pause and start to seriously reconsider the conceptualization of the student subject, the independent student subject, the student as somehow operating outside of a networked world, as somehow in assessment delivering something that is a measurable account of their own subjectivity and knowledge and mastery. And I think these moments of AI conversation and the shifting in our own epistemologies give us the opportunity to say, we need to think about the cyborg student, the network student, and not what we've traditionally cast as the student as an unformed subject, right? The moment we say student subject, we're saying you're not yet a full-formed subject. But I think this moment gives us the chance to rethink that human interaction between teacher and student as a way of rethinking what a student is.
Yeah, I think that's a nice transition to centering the student. And I'd like to invite Leota to really talk about, we're talking about a lot of positive things that can happen with AI, but let's also think about the new students that will be coming into UF and, what challenges might that present?
So what I'm hearing from the panelists is this idea that we need to stop looking at AI as something that's scary, some sort of dark void that will suck all the knowledge and capabilities from our students. And I think that's really important. It is transformative, and it is a disruptor. And disrupting education can be a very positive, amazing opportunity, not just for ourselves as educators and as parents, but for our students to move from what was to what will be. Because that's our job as an educator, is to prepare them for an unknown factor. We are not the goalkeepers of knowledge. And that has been sort of where education has been sitting for the past 30, 40, 50 years. That teachers are the goalkeepers of knowledge, and our job is to sort of pour that knowledge into students. AI gives us the ability to become facilitators or coaches with our students, not only to share what we know, but to share in the learning of what we both know, to become more a collaborative force. And so I don't want to dwell on the negatives, because yes, they're going to do things that they shouldn't be doing. That's a part of growing up and learning. But if we stop looking at AI as this scary thing that we need to block or prevent from happening, it's not going to work. We're just going to end up in that cycle of fighting and arguing and accusation, and you're not going to have that transformative growth that your students need. Teenagers are teenagers. It's kind of a universal thing. how they learn hasn't really changed overall in a long time, but we can learn how to work better with them to prepare them for a future that, frankly, we don't know about. A year and a half ago, I didn't know that much about generative AI. I was doing my thing in my classroom. Now, as educators, we're preparing them for a future that we don't know, and we need to focus. How do we give them the tools? We know AI is here to stay. It's been in our lives for a long time. Alexa, Siri, when you're shopping online. So let's not treat it as something fearful that we need to stick in the dark and ignore. Let's use it as a tool to help us get to know our students better, to be the facilitator, to be the coach alongside them instead of that keeper of knowledge.
And this is our third and final question before we switch to audience questions. This is one that I think about a lot. So in education, we have formative assessment, like during the learning process. Then we have summative assessment, like the big tests and papers at the end of the semester. But what I care a lot about is this formative assessment. After students leave our programs, after students are out in the real world, how have we prepared them for cultural participation? And so in what ways does AI impact confirmative assessments? As students continue as lifelong learners, how do we craft assessments that demonstrate our students are really competent and prepared, not only for industry, I know we have some industry reps today, but also for being critical thinkers and for cultural participation, for that cultural literacy piece. And I'm going to turn to you first, Sid.
Well, that's always the fun question, right? Because it's tied to so many different parts of how we educate and also what students do beyond. And, you know, now that student success programs aren't just measuring how students get placed in jobs, but what their career paths are and their long-term success, there's so much tied to that question of how do we prepare them. And this is why I embrace and always have embraced, but now we have a name for it, the concept of learning to learn. That what I want my students to walk away from isn't necessarily that sort of transferable skill, but the ability to learn what the next transferable skills are, how to figure out how to learn to use tools, how to adapt to different contexts. And so learning to learn process has become very important to me. But at the same time, I also think that as, particularly not just UF, but globally as universities talk about digital literacy skills, digital competencies, digital fluencies, that we now have to integrate AI literacies, competencies, and fluencies into pretty much every structure that we have in higher education. Because it doesn't matter if they're going to learn in the automotive industry, the nursing industry, whatever it happens to be. They not only have to learn how to learn, but they have to walk into those already with some base literacy competencies about how AI functions. You know, we're seeing around the world now gen ed programs, which are perpetually under revision on every campus in the world, the concept of how is AI, how is digital literacy going to become part of general education as well. And so for me, that's where we start in higher education. Beyond transferability into learning to learn and into developing AI literacy as part of what general education means.
Would you like to take it next, Leota? Would anyone like to follow Sid's comments?
I don't know how to follow that up.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, Sid. Like, what I think we all wanted, even though it's hard to accomplish, are the real-world authentic assessments, these project-based assignments, the problem-based assignments, where students are doing work that more closely aligns to what they might be doing in the future. We want to transfer the skills of like developing skills in that area in some way. I think the industry partnerships will be valuable. I've seen classes that have partnered with industries. Like, what's a problem that your company faces, and can we engage our students to like develop a solution for this problem? And those kinds of experiences, I think, will be invaluable in positioning, our courses, our degree programs as something that is really valuable for students and attractive, because they can see that this program provides connections, experiences, and the skills that they need to succeed, as well as our fundamental things that we try to teach in every class. We don't need to necessarily ditch that all, but I think the idea that we think about the different deliverables that we ask of students. Can we turn more things into projects? Can we turn more things into the types of content that they will be creating in the future rather than bubble sheets, hopefully? And there's ways that AI can scale to help us do those kinds of assignments. And then there's ways that AI transforms the types of deliverables, the types of skills that they need to develop in the future.
Yeah, I thought it was really powerful and impactful to see the student presentations yesterday and how that learning transfer has come such a long way from, their basic foundation courses that they were taking into actually pitching at the hackathon or doing their Shark Tank pitches or having generative AI art contests. And so you really see that transfer happening.
Yeah, I was thinking it's a reality that we're going to be trading some of our efficiency with testing certain ways and being able to grade those types of assessments with doing projects and that sort of thing. So I think we have to be transparent about that, and we have to kind of think through that and be honest with ourselves about what it means to really give feedback. I'm going to confess, I was playing around yesterday, grading some discussion boards, and I thought, what if I just took a discussion post and said, help me generate a supportive, thoughtful response to this discussion board post? And ChatGPT gave me some really good responses, but I started to really think about what Sid's talking about, the human part. And I read through the discussion post, and then I had to read through what was given to me. But I started wondering how much of the student response was generated by a machine, and then is the machine grading the machine at this point? Because, are they generating content, and then I'm generating content, and we're just like letting the machine talk back and forth? So I think we have to think through those. But I wanted to just add, the students that we're teaching now are going to have to wrestle with way bigger questions than is using ChatGPT cheating in my class. And they're going to wrestle with these ethical and moral decisions about AI in the world. And if we don't teach them and involve them in the conversation in our classes, instead of just coming up with our syllabus statement that says you can use it this way, that way, or the other, instead of involving them in that discussion and saying, we have these tools, what are your thoughts? How do you feel about the ethical and moral decisions about using these things in the classroom? If we involve them in those discussions, then they're going to be more prepared to be talking about that outside of our classrooms. And so I just think we'll do a great disservice to them if we're dictating to them about how to use it or when to use it and not having dialogue.
I think student voice is really important, both in student voice, how do we create assignments that allows the student's voice to come through? Because that's really what we're trying to do is we're all asking ourselves the question of, did the students do this assignment? So how do we create assignments and assessments that allows the student voice to shine through, as well as the voice in how is the class run, as Michael's saying? What are the parameters that students want to see in these areas?
Yeah, and to bring that back around to where we started with assessment and integrity, we know that the first reason that students cheat on assignment is poor time management. But the second reason is investment in the assignment. And if the assignments aren't well developed and showing students why they should be engaged in the assignment, that's when we see the integrity fall away. And so that's why these kinds of developments of assignments and assessment have to go hand in hand when we're having these larger conversations.
I think it goes back to something that was already mentioned in the panel, this idea that artificial intelligence is giving us as educators as well as our students an opportunity to make space for that more personalized learning, to have choices in how we're deciding to assess the tool for the assessment based on the purpose.
Great. So I'm going to open it up to audience questions now through the Poll Everywhere app. So we'll leave this up, and I haven't looked yet. I'm going to look and see if people have submitted any questions.
And then click on the top button there.
Yes,
See the
I
sort
am.
of by votes.
There we go. Okay. Well, we have one with quite a few votes. So our question that's received the most upvotes is, rather than try to discourage students to use AI, how do you feel about encouraging its use in order to level the playing field when it comes to AI technology literacy?
Yes.
Yes. What I'm most excited about with AI is how it brings new skills and makes it accessible to so many more people. Like, I don't want everyone to be a data scientist, but I want everyone to know that they can use AI to do some basic data science. You know, if you don't know how to write an Excel formula, you can use AI to help you write that Excel formula, and it, like, this cross-disciplinary aspect becomes so valuable for everyone. You know, you don't have to be a graphic artist to get a basic graphic. Now, we shouldn't replace artists entirely, but there are times where you need something, and AI puts those technologies and skills within reach of more people than ever before. So AI is a really big leveling tool when used properly.
And I think the issue of accessibility and equity is a very important issue to ponder with artificial intelligence. Because we know we have populations of students who, for various reasons, don't have that, and we need to find ways to make sure that they are getting that access to the artificial intelligence literacy, starting at a very young age.
Or
It
or
cannot
even
be
just
something we
tools.
walk into when you are a freshman in college, because not all of our children go to college.
Yeah, I think this is an incredibly important point. And I think also our language is playing a role in this. We keep talking about ChatGPT, and we're sort of making it the Xerox Band-Aid Jell-O kind of, term for generative AI, which I'm kind of opposed to. We see 1,000 new Gen Tech apps launched every week right now. And some of those are proprietary LLMs that with subscription-based, you have access to more direct, better kinds of data than others. ChatGPT is popular because it's free. And when you ask your students to produce something in Gen Tech and a population in your classroom only has access to the free because of socioeconomic reasons, and others have access to proprietary data, you're starting to create that separation. Access becomes important. And when we start to look across the country also, and we look at Appalachia or we look in New Mexico at these broad swaths of the country that don't have broadband access, and so the student who goes home and can't access the Gen AI tech, we're starting to push at those divides also. And so I think this access question is crucial, and that ties right back into where we started with ethics, integrity, and assessment also.
Right, and in addition to access, like knowing how to use the tools too, so training and making sure that everybody.
Right, and I think that's important too, because we all tend to make this assumption that these 18-year-old students of ours have a different kind of digital literacy than we have already coming in. Oh, they're on their phones, they must know how to do all of this stuff. This is another literacy they have to be trained in, and how to use it responsibly and how to use it, how the tools work. That's why that learning to learn concept becomes very crucial. We can't make the assumption that our students come in digitally literate. And if we want to think long term, and I could give you a particular anecdote about this, we have to recognize right now that students in kindergarten and first grade are starting to develop AI literacies that we are not yet ready to account for. I saw this with visual rhetoric 10 years ago, moving into writing platforms and multimedia writing, where faculty had not had professional development to deal with visuals and visual rhetoric the way that at the time 8th and 9th graders were. And they're going to be in our classrooms soon, and they're coming in. So professional development has to come back up over and over again in this conversation.
Yeah. Our next question also deals with academic integrity. So it's unclear that using something like ChatGPT is truly a violation of academic integrity. It's arguably a tool comparable to a word processor and definitely a tool students will have access to in the workforce. I'm going to turn this one to Chris because the wording is some wording that you use. Wouldn't it be advantageous to design assignments around AI tools?
Yeah, I think there's three phrases that I've been using in some workshops recently, and that's to design with AI. That's where you use AI in the creation of your course materials. There's design around AI, which was a kind of a knee-jerk reaction. How do I make an assignment where students can't use AI to do it? You know, I'm going to get out the blue books and do that instead. And then there's design to embrace AI, and that's where we are making AI a core component of the activity, whether that's asking students to write outlines and then use AI to write outlines and then work from there. To use AI to scale up parts of the assignment from the perspective of the teacher that they couldn't do otherwise, to acknowledge that AI is a part of the research and writing process, like Michael talks about iSearch papers, for instance, where the assignment is more about the metacognition of students, where we're trying to assess their thinking process by having assignments in stages and iterating over that and assessing their progress rather than the final product. So this idea that I do think that there should be assignments within every degree program, not every class, not every assignment, but at some point students should have a chance to embrace AI, to see what its capabilities are and also its limitations. Because if we don't teach the capabilities and limitations simultaneously, then students will have misconceptions about what it is and what it's capable of doing. And that would be...
And we can disconnect that from grading.
Yes.
Just because we use the word assignment doesn't mean that it has to be graded. They don't have to bear the burden of, oh, this is going to count somehow.
Another audience question is on the topic of centering students and thinking of AI as a positive force. How can AI be used to encourage and demonstrate deeper thinking and learning? Do we have some examples?
Well, I mean, the easy answer is, if we're going to go, ChatGPT, it's designed as a conversation. It's designed as a way to talk through things, to ask multiple questions. And as it gives response and gives you the opportunity to ask the next question, that drives that deeper thinking. And, you know, as an assessment tool, it allows us to automate the base level stuff and ask our students about the deeper thinking. You know, I think it provides a lot of opportunity for next level thinking. I mean, that to me is the real value of it, not that it can crank out a 500-word essay on Moby Dick, that, you know, but that it can I can ask it questions about the relevance of Moby Dick in cultural history and those kinds of things, and I can get beyond the basics. And as a teacher, I mean, think about it. How many of you right now, if your students turned in a paper that hadn't been spell checked, would you be exasperated because they hadn't used the technology that you now have to go through and do that level of assessment, that level of conversation? You want to get to the higher stuff. I think of ChatGPT in what it delivers as moving students from A to B, but we want to move them to C and D. And so if it gets them to A and B, let's start with C and move on.
I think another interesting part of that is this, again, this idea of accessibility, but not in terms of economic, in terms of individual learning. We work with neurodivergent students as well. And working with generative artificial intelligence gives them a safe place to experiment or practice before it becomes an assessment, before it becomes the grade, without having to put them in a situation where they would feel emotionally at risk.
Now, one assessment activity, I'll use those interchangeably today. One activity idea that I really like is that now that ChatGPT allows you to share links to a conversation, that maybe an instructor can pre-populate a prompt where it's going to ask students questions and challenge their thinking, ask them to explain deeper, send that to students. Students continue the conversation. They have this conversation with the AI, and then students can submit that conversation back in Canvas as a URL. So this idea that we are evaluating their thinking process gets at that, can we use AI to encourage deeper thinking? And there's lots of fun ways to do that using these like links within ChatGPT, and I keep using that because that's the one that we have and that it's easy to link to, but there are other ways of doing that as well.
One instructor shared with us in a workshop a couple of weeks ago where she had students sitting beside each other and they each typed the same question into ChatGPT and they got different responses and then had them analyze those responses to see which one was better or what parts were better in this one than the other one. And so just if you're thinking about developing critical thinking skills and skills that they can use outside, that was an example I thought of a really good assignment to have them looking at those responses and evaluating. So.
And that reminds me, Michael, we do have, to go back to, we do have a repository at the Center for Teaching Excellence where folks are able to contribute interesting assignments that they've developed with AI. And so we'd like to encourage everyone to do that so we can share them across campus and embrace teaching with AI, as Chris said. So no longer teaching around, but really embracing teaching with AI. And I think that's the end of our time today. I thank all the panelists, and I thank everyone for being here and submitting questions.